Okay, well, hello everybody. So if you don't already know me, my name is Madison. I lead branding and web design here at The Forward Female, and I'm super excited today to go over one of my favorite parts of my job is building a brand book. So I love this part of my job. So I'm excited to kind of tell you about how I do it, why I do it, and the kind of decisions we make as we go along the process. So let's get started. I gotta click it. Okay, there we go. So a few things to remember before is to turn your mics off just while the presentation is going, but keep your cameras on because we love your beautiful faces and we want to see you. And then if you have any questions during the presentation, to put them in the chat box. I won't be able to see them right away, but we will be addressing them at the end when we have a Q&A. And Gabby, my love right here, will be keeping track of them for me. So keep the questions in the chat box. Okay. So I also would love it if you could drop in the chat your goals for this hour together that you might have, either if that's for your current brand or for a brand that you are going to create. And also if you have a website link or Instagram handle, we love to get to know you as well as have everyone in the group get to know each other. So that's just a very easy way to do that. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay. I can't really see the chat, just so we know.
Yeah, that's a good one, Sue.
Okay.
Tighten up my brand and make it more powerful.
Okay, Mom. Oh, that's my mom, by the way. Love that. Okay. I'm gonna keep going a little bit. So on the left is our iconic crying Kim face. So that might be how you feel right now, or you felt in the past about branding. But I'm hoping by at the end of the hour, I will have you feeling like peace sign Kim, the iconic peace sign. So let's get into it. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to talk a little bit about The Forward Female really quick, just so you can get to know us a little bit better. But we are a coaching and creative agency. We were founded in 2019 by Priscilla, Lauren, and NJ. Priscilla and Lauren are on the right. But we've supported over 150 entrepreneurs to either start and grow their businesses globally. So we've worked with women in Canada, France, the UK, and Australia, and of course the US. And we've also hosted over 100 virtual events and in-person events with companies like Bumble, Microsoft, and many others. And our accountability club, which we have a few members in here today, but our accountability club helps entrepreneurs accomplish 95% more of their goals, which we'll get into a little bit later. Okay, so we want to get to know you. So if you could also put in the chat, maybe if you're starting a business, you already have a business, a little elevator pitch, whatever you're feeling like including, but just so we can get to know a bit more about you before we get started. If you haven't already, I don't know. Like I said, I can't see the chat.
We've got people joining us from New York, from France. Aaliyah said, I've worked with Maddie on my branding and website, so I'm just here to learn more of her magic. I love it.
Oh, hey, Aaliyah.
Bridget says, I can't put my camera on rushing between jobs, but she's entering the creator economy and developing her own personal brand, focused on travel and expat life in Paris and personal growth.
Ooh, love that, Bridget. Well, happy to have you here nonetheless. And don't worry if you can't have your camera on, I won't get mad. Okay, so I would also love if you could drop in the chat one of these numbers. One being if you have a strong vision, but you don't know how to execute it quite yet. A number two, if you're having trouble landing on the right aesthetic. A number three, if you're struggling with being consistent in your visual identity. Or number four, if you just have no idea what you're doing with your branding and you're just here to learn something, which all of the above we can help you with.
Ooh, looks like we're getting a mix. We've got some ones, a three, a four, couple threes actually. Ones, we got a 1, 2, and a 3, all of the above.
Perfect.
Aaliyah's just here for the ride. Love that for you.
Love that. Okay, then we'll get into it. So before we get into the actual visual part of your branding, there are some key components you have to consider, specifically outlining your goals for your brand. What do you want to accomplish with it? Is that gaining more visibility, attracting the ideal client customer, raising awareness, recognition, or just connecting your viewers to your brand? It should be all of them, but you can focus on certain ones more at a certain time, but definitely consider all of these when you are creating your brand. Another huge component to consider before getting into any of the visual part is the target audience for your brand. So getting into that psyche and understanding who they are, what they're doing, where they are showing up, where they are looking for you and what they like, what they don't like. So little ways to do this is finding out what information, product, or service that they are coming to you for. How can you attract them to you? And how will your messaging align with their values, their wants, their needs? So kind of aligning yourself with your target audience, exactly who you want to put yourself in front of. Now, understanding your uniqueness. So what sets you apart? What value do you bring to that audience that we were just talking about? What sets you apart from the competitors in your field? And what gap can you fill for your target audience? Now let's do this. My Beyonce, I love Beyonce. Perfect timing for branding. So now we can chat really more about what it takes to create a brand book that captures a target audience. But before we get into all the visual stuff again, I just want to decipher really quickly the difference between a business and a brand. So the business is the foundation. It's the structure, the product, the service, the logistical factor. The brand is your visual identity. It's the experience you create for your consumer. It's the connection you create with them and the emotions you evoke from them. So the brand is kind of what makes you memorable, what makes you recognizable, what makes you feel things with that brand and creates that like connection that keeps drawing them back and back and back. So building a brand book. On the left here is one of the brand books we actually just finished for a client. So just wanted to throw that in there a little bit. So key components, first and foremost, your target audience, the tone of voice, and your vision and mission. Understanding those three factors at the front of your branding will have the rest of everything kind of fall very nicely after, specifically because knowing that vision, that mission, knowing the tone of voice, knowing that target audience is what helps you decide on your fonts, your colors, and your logos. So here's kind of a little bit of an assembly of that brand deck that I just showed you. This is the summary of the end. So these are some logo variations we created, as well as some font choices and a color palette. So with this branding, she really wanted a credible and sophisticated look along with a lively experience for the audience. She works primarily in the education system, so she wanted that fun factor, but also along with that resourceful, like credible source as well. So that's kind of how we use the paperclip as that visual element to create that fun like connection to education, as well as the color palette being very bright and lively colors so that she can use different ones here and there to create that lively feel. A quick thing I want to note is we're not going to go too into detail about color hex codes, but I just want to note here, each color we've listed the hex code, the RGB code, and the CMYK. Those are just different codes that you can use in Photoshop, Illustrator, Canva, any kind of source you're using to find a color. It's an easy way to copy and paste the same color and use it over and over again. So that kind of touches on that consistency part instead of messing with colors to figure out the right one and just keep doing that every single time. You copy and paste those hex codes in a note on your phone or in your Canva Pro account, wherever you have them. Saving that hex code makes it really easy to use those colors over and over again. So I know this is a lot at first glance, so I'm going to break it down step by step. So choosing your fonts. Choosing fonts is probably the most difficult part, only because there are so many options. So many, especially if you have Canva Pro, or especially if you're using Google Docs or any platform that offers fonts. There's a million options, and there's even more on Creative Market, all of those places. So I just kind of wanted to separate them into 4 separate groups for you. So right now we have serifs, sans serifs, scripts, and slab serifs. So I'm going to break them down really quick. A serif is a type font that has small projections on the ends of their letter strokes. The best example of this would be Times New Roman. So if you've ever written an MLA essay in college, high school, middle school, you've probably used this font. Serifs are very common because of that elevated and sophisticated look. They are really nicely paired with minimalist sans serifs. Just because they have those little intricate details on the end, they look very nice with sans serifs paired on, especially in branding. Serifs are also nice to italicize for an accent font. So if you didn't want to use a separate font for your accent font, you could always use one of your serifs and just kind of italicize them. It changes the structure of the font almost altogether, but it still is cohesive with that choice. So a sans serif is basically the opposite of a serif. It has zero embellishments or extra details. So it's very minimalist, simple, plain, but like those are best paired with those more decorative fonts, the serifs or scripts. But if you wanted to pair multiple sans serifs, I totally would never tell you not to. But if you do, I do recommend either bolding or italicizing or capitalizing, doing something to one of them that separates them from the others, just because at a distant glance, they might look very similar on your branding. Another group is scripts. Scripts are linking together the letters letter by letter. So they replicate kind of handwriting, cursive, or oh my God, I'm blanking, signatures. So that is typically only used for accent fonts. We tend to steer our clients away from using those for any body or headings just because they can be harder to read. And the easier stuff is to read, the more viewers will read it and then stay. Slab serifs are similar to serifs where they have that identified thick block-like serifs at the end. So those same embellishments at the end of their strokes, but they are much thicker and much bolder. Okay, so choosing your font, this is kind of the hard part. So we always recommend selecting a header, a subheader, and a body, and then of course, if you want an accent font. You don't always have to choose a separate font for your accent font. Like I mentioned before, you can change some fonts and make them an accent font. So on the left here, we have two sans serifs as one bolded and one not bolded for the header and subheader. And then we have a serif as the body, and we just italicized that serif to make an accent font. So just slight changes in those things can really make the difference and visually impact your audience. When selecting combinations of fonts, you want to make sure that they're visually compatible. So like I recommended, sans serifs with serifs, whether you do that as the header and body or you switch them. Also doing simple body text pairings with decorative headings. So if you choose a very intricate font for your heading, you're typically going to want to choose a more simple or sans serif font for your body, just because you don't want it to be too busy and overwhelming for the viewer. Like I mentioned before, bolding or italicizing your sans serifs is a great way to kind of give that variation as well if you wanted to go for the more minimalist route. A huge factor is you want your fonts to be easy to read. At a distance, close up, however far or close they are to the content you're providing, you want them to be able to read it. And then using accent fonts to elevate your vision is a great way also to kind of set your brand apart from others. It just kind of gives that little extra design element that not all brands have. So great option. And one last thing I want to mention about fonts is selecting timeless fonts. So that there are a lot of fonts that are kind of going in and out of trends as we have ever-changing trends all the time. So you want to kind of stick with those timeless fonts that won't fade with those trends. Because if they fade with the trends, you're going to be like, oh, like I'm bored of this branding. I need something different. And then you're going to constantly be changing. And then you're taking away that consistency from your consumer. So really quickly, if you do have fonts that you've selected, but you're a little unsure how they're going to look on everything, you can always set up a different design or layout. So how I did on the left, I took the heading, the subheader, and the body, as well as our accent, and I just kind of laid it out how it might look on a website, not only to give the client more of a view of how it looked, but to give myself a better view of how it looked. So that way you can really decide, you know what, this is the right choice. I like this one. We're going to move forward with it. So deciding on colors. So this is one of my favorite parts. So I love to start with dark and light variants. So whether you have a white to black variant, or you start with cream and you end with dark green, you want to have an even contrast between your different colors. And I always recommend that clients stay within 4 to 6 colors. You can go lower and you can go higher with exceptions, but typically I recommend 4 to 6. On the right, we have a color palette that is way more than 6. So I just wanted to put that out there really quick. This is an example of one of those exceptions. This client creates mix and match jewelry that is really unique and has many, many colors. So we wanted to include that uniqueness in her branding as well. So that's kind of why we went along with this more robust color palette. Typically in her branding though, she's only going to stick to certain colors. So at the bottom is my more refined color palette for her as well. But she has these options if she needs them when she is doing creating content or creating email newsletters, etc. Another thing I want to note is that the colors you choose to evoke emotion in your consumer or your client. So I'll get into a little more detail about that later, but like I said, making those decisions in your branding, you are keeping that target audience in your mind at all times. You also want to make sure that the colors you're choosing are legible when layered on top of one another, whether that be the logo or the fonts or different images. You want to make sure that they layer together nicely because you will be using them in different ways on your social media, on your website, all of the above. And last, but certainly not least, you want to pick colors you like. You're going to be using a lot of them. You're going to be using them a lot, and you don't want to get sick of them. So pick colors you like as well. So on the left is the social media mock-up we created for that brand that we showed with that extensive color palette. But I just wanted to show you kind of how we used all those colors, so you didn't think I was crazy for using so many. But on the right side is the color psychology chart that I use when I am creating a color palette for a client. So we want to create your branding with intention, and intention based solely on your target audience. So on the left, we use the orange and the red and the yellow to kind of evoke that creativity, the fun, the spontaneity. So those are the emotions that orange and yellow make you feel, the red for excitement. But we chose purple to encourage creativity, to inspire, for imagination. So picking those colors with intention of your target audience's emotions and what emotions you want to evoke from them. Okay, logos. I love logos. So logos, they are very important, as we all know, and they tend to be one of the more stressful parts of starting and creating a brand. So on the right, we have 5 different logo options. 1 and 5 are very similar. They are those pictorial abstract visual options. So as we all know, Apple or Nike, if you see that check mark, if you see that apple with the bite out of it, you know who that brand is. Same with Starbucks. You see a Starbucks cup, you know exactly where that cup is from, not because it's a coffee shop, but because it is Starbucks, and you know that logo, you recognize it, and you connect yourself to it, whether you like that coffee or not. So logo concepts. When you are creating your logo, you want to make sure that it is meaningful to your brand. You want to make sure that when your viewer sees it, they are, oh, I know what they're doing, I know who they are, and I know why I want to be associated with that brand. You also want to have primary and secondary variations. So primary and secondary, I'll show you some examples later, but primary and secondary give you 2 different options to use in different formats. Your primary is your primary, so you're going to be using that one the most, typically at the top of your website, on your business cards, in your social media profile picture, but you're going to be using those secondary variations probably in the footer of your site, or as like your stamp of approval on all of your social media, just kind of putting it out there so that you are creating that recognition, creating the memory for that viewer. You also want to make sure that your logo looks good in the different variations of your color palettes. So whether you're layering the green on black or blue, etc., you want to make sure that the logo still is crisp, stands out, and really grabs the attention of the viewer. You also want to make sure you are obsessed with it. So if you're not obsessed with it, I recommend going back to the drawing board, because that logo, just like your colors, you're going to be using it a lot. You're going to be seeing it a lot, and your viewers are as well. And your brand is you. So represent yourself the way you are obsessed with. So here are some logo options. This is a primary on the left and a secondary on the right. We created this logo in Adobe Creative Cloud using Illustrator to create custom elements and features that made the fonts look a little bit more custom and adjusted to the brand. So this brand is that jewelry brand I mentioned, where they have mix match pieces that are very unique. So we wanted to create that same aspect as well in the fonts. So as you can see, we've chosen a couple different fonts for this logo and mix match them and created that custom element. Specifically connecting the R with the N and having the N create the I at the dot, as well as connecting the A and the O at the forefront. And then simplifying it into a secondary logo. So giving you that other option to use in different places of your content. Here's another option that we created, primary at the top, secondary at the bottom. This is another one we did on Creative Cloud using Illustrator. So connecting the letters and creating those custom elements to create that beautiful visual effect. But we did want this one to be a little bit more credible, simple, and sophisticated. So that's why it's very simple and lined out on one. We also have the tagline at the bottom, but we did still want to create that visual connection to the audience. That's why we have the heart that was created by the S and the M. Now, I don't want you to think that you have to create your logo in Adobe, because Adobe can be daunting for many people and it's not everyone's favorite. So here are logos we created in Canva. So this is a primary on the left and a secondary on the right. So this is just to show you that you don't need Adobe or any knowledge in Adobe to create a logo that stands out and connects your audience to your brand. As you can see, we've layered different fonts, different weights of fonts, and different elements to create a visual effect for that target audience of this brand. So now my favorite tools. So 4 female favorite tools that we use when creating a brand. So first and foremost, Canva. This is a really incredible tool, as any entrepreneur may know or may not. This is a great opportunity to upload your brand kit, especially if you have Canva Pro. If you upload your brand kit, you can select the colors and the fonts and your logos and constantly just be using them over and over and over. That's the best way to stay consistent, is having it right there in front of you instead of having to look for it all the time. So like I mentioned with those hex codes, you don't need to remember them or have them written down. They'll be right in your brand kit. So Canva is a great place to create your social media, your email signatures, your newsletters, all of those things you can design in this one platform, and your ultimate branding kit is uploaded. The 2 logos in the middle are Unsplash and Pexels. These websites I love, love, love to use to find stock images. So, and they are free. They're free stock images and they're high quality, high resolution. So I use these typically for mood boards, but we also use them for social media content as well as website content when we feel that the brand may need help with the visual content that we are producing. On the right is Adobe Creative Cloud. Like I mentioned, if you want that custom element with those fonts in your logos, that is a great way to create, is within Adobe Creative Cloud, because it's so easy, not so easy right off the bat, but it is a easy learn to just change certain things in those custom elements. And then at the bottom, we have Coolors and Noun Project. So Coolors is a great website to use for color palettes. So if you're kind of stuck and you don't know where to even start with your colors, you can just go through there and look through the palettes they already have, or you can shuffle through a color palette maker and you just click your spacebar until you find the one you like. And you can lock certain colors if you like, oh, I love this burgundy color, I want to use it, but I don't like any of the other colors they showed me. You lock that burgundy and you keep Canva Pro, you have a limitless Rolodex of elements that you can choose from as well. Okay, so now that we've gone through kind of like the key components of the branding kit, we're going to talk a little bit about how to make your brand recognition stand out, how to make you memorable. So the key to that brand recognition is your brand's connection to your audience. So a consistency with the brand that you are obsessed with will make that connection to your audience that makes you memorable. So being consistent on all platforms and ways of reaching your audience. So like I said, having your branding kit in Canva Pro and being able to quickly click on the colors or the fonts and change everything makes creating content very simple and not too time consuming. And I think that takes away from being able to be consistent is the amount of time that we spend trying to do it. So that kind of limits that time for you. Aligning your brand values and your tone of voice with that of your audience really helps create that connection to your audience. So they recognize you because they align themselves with you. And like I said before, making every decision with your audience in mind, those colors, creating the emotion that you want your audience to feel, the fonts, making sure they're legible for your audience to see, all of that stuff, as well as putting your logo on everything. So it doesn't need to be right in their face, but having something from your brand, your logo, your submark, your elements, something from your brand on everything, making sure that they know, oh, that Instagram post is from Apple. I know exactly who that's from. They know because they recognize you because they've connected themselves to you. So here's an example of kind of our consistency in branding. So this was for our client, Summers Medical Journal, who I showed you for the logos. But this is kind of an overview of the branding we did for them. So the mood board, the secondary and primary logos, the submarks, the fonts, and the colors. And on the right is kind of how we were consistent in using their branding. So creating the business cards here on the right, the social media templates on the left, and the email signature at the bottom. So as you can see, we included the logo or some visual element from their branding everywhere. We layered the colors in different ways to create that contrast, but it's all still in unison. So that's kind of how we create that consistency that makes the person that is viewing this content remember them time and time again. So the little things, utilizing the little things is honestly one of the best ways to make your brand recognizable and stand out among competitors. Specifically, my favorite is creating a favicon for your website. So whether that is your secondary logo or just an element from your branding, as you can see in the bottom, we did this for Maria Menounos. We put her element in her favicon as well. So this just kind of separates your website's tab from the other million tabs on someone's screen. Also including your logo and everything, like I mentioned before, and creating unique profile images on your platforms, whether that's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, creating those banners that just creates that consistent element where even on Facebook, whether you can see, obviously Facebook's branding is blue and with a white background, but on your Facebook page, they know it's you because your green is right there and your logo is your profile image. So even on a separate platform, they still feel like it's your brand. And the last, but certainly not least, have fun with it. Having fun with your brand is what proves that authenticity to your audience and makes them feel connected to you. Okay, the most common misconception is that your business is your brand. And I'm here to tell you it is not, ladies and gentlemen, if there's gentlemen here, but you are your brand. So just be you and be you consistently. I know that was a lot of information. So I have this right here as a summary, and I'm going to grab a quick drink of water if you need to write any of these things down.